the Army values, the Warrior ethos, coaching, and therapy. This is Warrior Leadership. And this is Warrior Leadership. Welcome to another episode of Warrior Leadership. My name is JJ Hardy, the coach. And
I'm DB, the therapist.
There is DB, the therapist, right there, my man. I'm excited because today, I'm always excited, man. I think I say that every single time we get on one of these things, but I'm pumped up. But we're going to talk about another essential part of social skills. And today we're going to talk about conflict resolution.
Okay.
And, I'm going to let you start it off, but I have my bit to say about conflict resolution, and I always have a bit to say on everything.
So why you don't start it off then?
I can start it off.
Go ahead, knock it out.
Knock it out? Okay.
Yeah.
So when I think of conflict, I think of, anything that is difficult. And so usually those things that are difficult are only as difficult as we make them. So oftentimes having, and I like to use systems and processes for everything, because I find that if it's repeatable for me, then it's easy for somebody else and I can teach it to them. So I do teach in my leadership course, and I've been taught for a number of years, and I know you served in the Army too. So they taught you the 7 steps to problem solving. And they taught it to us at a very, very young age. By the way, Private E1, JJ Hardy, learned problem solving skills from the U.S. Army. And when I think of conflict, it doesn't have to be, shoot 'em up, bang, bang stuff. No, that's another type of conflict. Conflict can be anything that is difficult. So if you have a system, and we'll go into the problem solving steps later on how to deal with that, whether it's developing goals or having a problem solving solution or whatever the case may be, then it makes everything easier. But really, it all starts in the mind. And if it starts in the mind, then I would like to hear what the therapist has to say.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, conflict, it's a very, it's interesting. In the Chinese language, the word conflict means danger or opportunity. And it really speaks to what you just, or, kind of alluding to earlier, is just that, we talk about perception a lot. And sometimes when our perception of a conflict is danger, then we avoid it. And when we avoid things, what's interesting about avoidance is that avoidance shows up in almost every mental illness. And the whole essence of warrior leadership is really facing things head on. And sometimes we have those moments where we freeze, right? You think of fight, flight, or freeze, and we'll freeze. And sometimes freezing is okay, stopping is okay, and resetting, figuring out a course of action. But we always got to keep moving forward into the conflict. And that from a therapeutic standpoint, sometimes it doesn't make sense to lean into the pain. I have this saying that I learned from my mom, and it's called pain over pleasure. And it's interesting because Sigmund Freud also, researched this idea of pain, and he talked about how human beings are resistant to pain. They resist it. And so if you look at conflict as something that's going to cause you pain, you're probably going to avoid it. And so if you just tell yourself this isn't going to be painful, believe it or not, you can get through it. And both of us, JJ, we had that experience in basic training, didn't we?
I would say a lot of training.
And throughout all training and every, just being told that, running feels good when it really hurts at 4 a.m. in the morning, or push-ups feel good when your arms feel like they're getting ready to break. And then you get to this place mentally where you actually don't feel the pain anymore. And it's because of the psychology of it, is that when you lean into the pain and you embrace it, we talk about embrace the suck a lot. And this is not to say, suck it up and drive on. But at moments in life, when you're in a conflict, that's essential for that particular moment. And then you have to take a step. And I think that's where therapy comes in at. then you could come into a place of therapy or coaching, and then you could talk through issues maybe you have compartmentalized or put to the side. But in certain conflicts, you do have to like push through and look at that as an opportunity.
I agree. And actually, we have a user here that made a comment. Conflict is any occurrence that changes the relationship you have with yourself or with someone else.
I
And I
like that.
and I think that kind of goes along with what we're saying. And I completely agree with that. I want to go into, before I forget or before we lose track of where we're at. You brought up danger.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you take it all the way back to childhood, when we have danger or pain, what's the first thing that we do? Well, we run away from it or we cry
Mm-hmm.
because it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as we get older, I would still, and I have a 17-year-old that says that they still haven't learned this yet, but that your threshold for pain has to be higher. Your ability to react to danger has to be different, because as adults, we have to react in a way that's constructive rather than destructive, or what's just as bad as destructive, which is avoidance. And if we don't address our problems, which is danger or pain, and pain is not always physical pain, sometimes pain is mental pain, then it just gets worse and it festers up. And when you run away from your problems, they never get solved either. And that can come back and bite you in the ass at a later time too. So I think the most important thing that we should talk about today in conflict resolution is the importance of staring pain or danger in the face and figuring out how to, or maybe some ways to solve those problems, those pain points, to avoid avoidance, and make sure that you actually take charge of your situations that cause you pain or danger, to make sure that you're not making those problems worse.
Yes. Yeah, and avoidance is actually a strategy, but another one that we can closely talk about is competing. When we are in conflict, we start competing with one another. And that's probably a whole nother topic. Like we could literally talk about competition like as a series, but you know, you go to the gym, you go to places like that, and there's always there's always one that wants to be the alpha, and it's about competition. And sometimes if we're not careful, what we're realizing is that what we're missing, I should say, is there's an internal conflict a lot of times, I think, going on within a person that is always needing to compete and feel like they have to one up the other person. Sometimes if you're not introspective and look inside of yourself, you could actually be, that individual could be missing the real conflict, which is the internal one. And sometimes and I see this a lot in therapy, like people want they want to have what other people have, and so then the conflict in that is desiring something that the other person has and not realizing and missing what you have. Like each one of us have these different varying gifts and abilities, and so we have to look inside and deal with that conflict first. Too often we're focusing on external factors, and we're not we're doing ourselves a disservice. And we have to start with the conflict within.
I agree. The conflict within is very, very important. And so I'm a leadership coach, which translates to executive coaching, which translates to the workplace, right? So what's really, really important about conflict resolution, say you were a manager or higher, it's important not only to understand how to deal with conflict, but how to help others deal with conflict, because you're actually going to lose trust if you're in a leadership position and somebody comes to you with a problem and you're constantly avoiding it, or you never have the answer or the solution to the problem. And that may seem not fair, but when you're put in that position, that's actually the expectation. So not only will you lose your credibility from those that work under your charge, but your peers and superiors will also lose faith in you, your abilities, and they'll see your lack of being able to solve problems as a weakness. And honestly, if you're in a leadership position, because people look to you for strength, it is a weakness. So it has to be developed. And this is what you talk about so many times, Derek, is, when when you have to be a leader, just part of being a leader is being, you have to get yourself right before you can get other people right.
Yes.
And I that's really what I'm addressing here, is making sure as a leader that if you can't handle these things, that you get some training and get some strategies to make sure you learn how to handle these things, even if it's therapy. There's nothing wrong with therapy. There's a stigma out there that there's something wrong with therapy, but it's a falsity. Maybe 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, that would have been looked at as a weakness or whatever the case may be. But it's very important that people understand that they have to get over that if they're going to have people looking to them for strength.
Right. Absolutely. And, if you take the stigma out of it and you seek that in and of itself is a conflict, right? Just reaching out for help. It's a conflict. But again, danger or opportunity. And, there's a quote right here that I'm looking at that says, in work and sports and war, competition is good, but in group dynamics, it's not effective and problem solving. And so, Coach, that's exactly what you just said, which is so many times, we think about, especially in business, it's profit, profit, profit. We got to make profit. I was on a call earlier, and this is even in the behavioral health field or healthcare field, is we're having a conversation about post-vention training. And, one of the barriers to our staff, feeling like they're supported with post-vention is that there are a bunch of managers who only look at things from the bottom line metric perspective. And so we work in a field where there's lives at stake. And so when invariably somebody loses their life to suicide, or even just the patient just dies, right? The patient could die on hospice. That has an impact on the workforce, especially when you as the worker have a connection with them. And so I think quite often the bigger conflict there is that when individuals can't have the inability to feel and to connect with others, then you want to talk about conflict resolution. Those individuals are in more need of therapy and coaching than anybody else. Like, whether they want to acknowledge it or not, the reality is that the earlier intervention, the better. So if you go years and years and years of avoiding conflict, repressing emotions, those things will come back on you. And no matter as a human being, right? Each one of us are kind of built the same way, right? And if we think that, and this is what I found very interesting, repressing emotions is considered a primitive emotion. I mean, primitive defense mechanism. So when you hear that, you think of somebody who's like repressing their emotions and they're like, yeah, everybody, kind of like this idea, like everyone does it. I wonder what they would think if they knew that it was a primitive defense mechanism. And which means that there's other defense mechanisms that are more superior than that defense mechanism. And so clearly you should investigate it and learn more strategies on how to deal with your emotions and manage them, because essentially most of society uses that as their way of coping with life. And you can repress emotions by means of many different ways. And most people do it through different forms of addiction, right? And that's why we always, in the therapy world or in the behavioral health world, we say that addiction is the issue of the heart. And so the heart is the seat of the emotions. And so if someone is engaged in any form of addiction, it's a heart issue. And so again, you got to address that conflict. You got to get to the core, the root issue. And once you're able to do that, then you can grow.
So let's go ahead and talk about those problem solving skills. So there's one way that you can identify sorry, not identify, but solve a problem, and that and problem solving can be used to almost solve any conflict. And really, it's getting to the root cause and solving it is really all the 7 steps to problem solving do. But you identify the problem, so you figure out what it is. Maybe you make a list of what's happening right now. You list the facts and assumptions. You make a list of all the ways that you can identify what that problem is related to. Then you create solutions. Well, I don't need to explain that. Solutions, create a list of them. Analyze the solutions. That's where you take a deep dive and you weigh those solutions with all the facts and assumptions and figure out which one maybe you should take action on first. You compare the solutions and you make and implement the decision. And then you evaluate and learn. Well, that's should be a constant thing for everything that you do, but that's just one way. So when it comes to conflict revolution, when it comes to conflict resolution, whatever it takes, but first you got to figure out what it is. Whether you're using the MRT stuff that we talked about last week with the ACT model to kind of figure that out, that's another way to do it. The 7 steps to problem solving. There are many different models for root cause analysis. Whatever it is. I mean, it could be something so simple as, I haven't taken a vacation in 5 years and my wife is getting on my case about it. Well, figure out what you can do about it. Make that happen. Maybe the conflict is not the vacation itself. It's the wife just being frustrated about finances. And at work, maybe you showing up late to work is not necessarily the root cause of that problem. Maybe you need to figure out why you can't seem to get up and get out of your house on time. And that's your internal conflict. That's the root cause of the problem. And with conflict resolution and being resilient, most of that is they're just made up problems that we have. And if we really identify what they are and we tell ourselves that we're not going to do it anymore, it won't be a problem anymore. But you have to change your behavior along with that.
Yes. Yeah. What was brought to my mind when you were saying that about the just the model you introduced, there's a treatment modality, an evidence-based treatment modality called problem solving therapy. And it's similar. It has some of the same objectives, which are, selecting and defining the problem, establishing realistic and achievable goals for problem resolution, generating alternative solutions, implementing decision-making guidelines and implementing the preferred solutions, evaluating the outcome. Essentially, it's the same model that you introduced. And I think that's what we're finding interesting, where we keep talking about this bridge between coaching and therapy. Some of the same tools and modalities they may be called something different, but where they connect is some of the just the basic things here. Like so for me, you think of weighing out the pros and the cons of a situation. Sometimes we can get in such a severe emotional state to where we can't figure it out in our own minds. And in those states, that's where you really need to talk through it with a counselor, because there is obviously CBT, that's for someone, cognitive behavioral therapy, that's someone with more insight, more clarity. But if someone's in this heightened state where adrenaline and cortisol is pumping through their body, then you have to use problem solving therapy first. And then as you begin to work through it with that individual, then and then using also like motivational interviewing techniques. That's another strategy to help people problem solve. But then once you help them gain that clarity, help them emotionally be able to regulate their emotions again, then you can move into some more insight oriented type therapy. But then at that point, as you begin to monitor that over time, now it's time for them to start moving into some coaching, man, and then still be able to, it's almost like it's a crawl, walk, run phase. And the more and more you help people through that process and help them regulate their own emotions, it's empowering.
Ooh, let's unpack this. So probably Michael, but this is a viewer here that's watching right now. He or she said, repressing your emotions keeps you internally and emotionally stuck. Anger is an emotion you shouldn't repress, but maybe redirect.
Oh man, I want to grab that one.
Do it. Unpack it, man. Let's do it.
Oh, I think I need it back up on the screen. That was so good. I want to like pick that apart. Repressing your emotions keep you internally and emotionally stuck points, right? We address, if we don't know what our stuck points are, we will continue to have these cognitive biases, and they just lead to distorted thinking patterns. And then that emotion keeps going and going, no matter what the emotion is. And anger is the tip of the iceberg emotion. And so if I'm always fueled by anger and I'm not addressing the core underlying emotions, then the user is right that we should be figuring out a way to redirect, but we should also be engaging with that emotion and anger and asking ourselves, why am I angry? What about this situation? What is my automatic thought? Because whatever that automatic thought is, usually that's the stuck point. And you know what? What's powerful about a stuck point? A stuck point is it can go all the way back to earlier memories that we repressed. And we may or may not remember that incident that happened, but our body takes the score. And that's for me, that's what's so powerful about therapy, that someone can go through something as a child, literally, 0 to 2 years old, even in utero, right? They can go through an experience inside of their mother's belly. If their mom was in an environment where there was, any kind of trauma, and her adrenaline and cortisol was pumping in her body, that child even in that moment, could be triggered by something at a point in their life and not know why and what the memory was that caused it, but they will have a thought pattern that's associated with the feeling. And whatever that thought is, that's considered the stuck point, man. And it's very powerful. I've worked with people before, and over a course of months, we've been able to create what we call a trauma narrative and be able to connect the dots between something that happened in their childhood. And then they were able to come up with a statement similar to this: I am a natural born loser. And then being able to connect different times in their life where that same thought pattern has came up for them. And I'm like, wow.
Oh, wow.
It's amazing when you connect someone's narrative throughout their lifespan, and then they've been telling themselves that at every stage of their life.
Earlier on in the call, we talked about those reactions that we have as children that are actually just as destructive as they are ineffective. And, I think anger is one of those. You're not really addressing the problem when you lash out in anger. Anger is the easiest emotion to have and to show. Yes. And, we all do it. And, really what anger is a lack of control. Mm-hmm. Because when you get angry about something, you don't take the time to think about it and do something with it. You just getting upset. I've heard people say in my past that people they need leaders that are in control of themselves. And the opposite of control is out of control. And when you're angry, you're out of control.
Yes,
And it's, I'm not saying that it's not okay to get angry once in a while, because we all do it. It's just a natural thing that happens. But what are you going to do with that emotion afterwards? First of all, if you're at home with a loved one, now you have something you have to probably repair. If you're at work, it's no different. And that repair could be a lot worse. And I know we're jumping back like 10 videos to emotional intelligence here, but
it's all connected.
This is a conflict, man.
Yes.
So I mean, when you're dealing with having to repair, that's a conflict. And what you create when you are angry in your work environment is you lose all your credibility. And
Yes.
because you do that, is if you're already in a management position, or maybe you're a director, that's even worse when you're a director, because then you have all these people below you that you lost credibility with. But now you also have these peers that also have all these other people, and then you have the most senior people in the company that you lost credibility with. And so that type of damage is not something you can usually repair in one conversation.
Right. And you're bringing up a really good point, because the major conflict here is that the conflict between imploding and exploding. So when someone, and especially, someone who is, to be honest, the core emotion is fear.
Yep.
And it's not fear that, they're going to necessarily be hurt a lot of times, especially with like people with warriors, especially. I'm going to speak for myself, is that, the greatest fear is not that somebody is going to hurt me, but that I might hurt someone else. And it's because of everything that I've been conditioned to do, and just throughout my whole life, even environments that I grew up in. And so if you're not careful, you'll tell yourself that I can't control myself. And if you say that to yourself, your brain is going to believe what you say. And so we really need to understand that we have to encourage ourselves and tell ourselves that, you know what, it may not always go my way, but I can still be safe when I leave outside of my comfort zone. That is so important. Where you see, especially in this day and age where everything is online, and I get it that the technology is there, but isolation is one of the isolation in and of itself is a pandemic, and it was going on before the actual pandemic. And because of the pandemic, it's gotten worse. And so, and as a society, we're kind of nurturing this isolation, which is it's worrisome, because human beings need social interaction, which is really the crux of this whole series. We're talking about social intelligence and connecting. And so it's so important for people to connect and be willing to get out of that comfort zone, because when you're isolated like that, it's just the breeding ground for depression, anxiety, and for all the other, potential mental health issues that one can get in isolation. And so, the internal conflict is to connect or not to connect. That's the question.
I like it. How philosophical of you. So, I really have to, say something about that. One of my core beliefs is that community solves all problems. And, in the business world, I truly believe that. That's why I created a relationship in a community with a couple other gals that you probably see me on here with doing some other videos. But, when you have a community surrounding a problem, it gets solved more efficiently. And usually the problem is the solution to the problem is always a better one, because when you try to do everything on your own, you only have so much brain power, and you can only see so much of the problem. when you have more people looking at things, it's just more efficient. I know that some people say you can have too many chiefs and not enough Indians or whatever the case may be. And I don't know if that's racist in today's society or not. I have absolutely no idea. But what I will say is that when you have the right people, you get the right solution. So don't just choose any people. Don't walk into a crowd and say, I'm depressed today. I just got in an argument with my wife, because you're going to get a bunch of garbage flying your way. Chances are, because people are all going to be saying something different. It's going to be, but if you surround yourself with the right people, you will come up with the right solution. You should always have a circle of 2 to 3 people that you're willing to talk to about problems. And if you don't have 2 or 3 people, or even that one person that you're willing to use as a comfortable, safe space to talk about problems with, then you've probably given up on yourself. But you need to find that. And once you find that, you're going to be a lot better off, because we're gregarious creatures. We are human beings. We need human interaction. So if you're part of that population that DB was just talking about, go outside of your comfort zone and try to build a relationship. But I'm not going to go any more into that. We're already over our 30 minutes, so I'm not going to beat a dead horse. DB, do you have any closing comments before I close this out real quick?
Oh, no, I'm good.
Excellent. Well, so I'm going to go and say what I always say. If this information resonates with you, then please like this video, subscribe to the channel, share this, repost it, but more importantly, keep the conversation going and put a comment below. We really appreciate everybody who's watching this video, and we hope to talk to you at some point in the future. Please reach out to us if you don't have that community that I was just referring to, because human connection is so important. Please do not give up on yourself. We have nothing but love for y'all. Take care, and we'll see you next week.